I didn't think this episode would be as controversial as it seems to be on the Twitter sphere. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 68 of the Journeys anime titled Rivals for Go, The Road to Mew just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes return to Oak's lab for an errand, only for some returns and some revelations to be made. What happens? Well, let's just find out. I want to do a quick recap of the episode first before I talk about my thoughts on this episode, because I think it's important to set up why it seems to be so controversial. The episode begins with our heroes at Oak's laboratory because Go has to deliver some papers from Cerise to Oak. This then leads to Oak asking Go about his goals, and when Go says his goal is to capture Mew, Oak tells him about Project Mew, a project that's being designed right now to try to capture and study Mew. He invites Go, but Go says no. Then after that, Ash returns to where all of his Pokemon are, well, not all of them, almost all of them are, and they have a bit of a reunion before Oak tells him that Ash's Infernape has been missing the last couple of days, and while he and Tracy tried to find it, they couldn't find it, so our heroes go looking for Infernape. While searching for Infernape, our heroes stumble upon an Onyx, and when Go tries to capture it and it fails, it almost attacks him, but luckily they are saved by none other than Gary. Ash and Gary have a bit of a reunion before Ash introduces Go to Gary. Gary antagonizes Go similar to how he used to antagonize Ash, before Gary tells him that the reason he's here back in Kanto is because he's trying to look for Moltres, and that his research has led him to the fact that it's probably nearby in a valley. Ash is also trying to look for Infernape, and Gary thinks that maybe it's nearby, so they go together and Go comes along. They reach the valley, and for a little bit they discuss how Gary figured out that Moltres would be nearby, and why Infernape could also be nearby, and it turns out he's right, Infernape is nearby. There's a small reunion before Moltres appears, and our heroes have a battle with Moltres. It goes about as well as you'd think a battle with a legendary would, which is surprisingly good, and at the end, Moltres leaves, and while doing that, it drops one of its feathers, which Gary collects, and later we find out that Gary's also participating in Project Mew, and getting the Moltres feather was one of his tasks to be invited to the team. Gary antagonizes Go a little bit more, and Go ends up saying that he will join the Project Mew team. So there's a couple of dynamics at play here. First of all, Go and Gary. Gary is used here as a plot device to get Go to join Project Mew, but I'm more surprised about Go here. When did Go not want to work on a team anymore? I thought all of his development so far, learning to work together with Ash, learning to work together with Chloe, I thought all of that was leading to the fact that he can work with people. So why all of a sudden does he say he can't work with people? That seems to make no sense. But even disregarding that, while I was editing this, I just realized I wanted to talk a bit more about this Go excuse that he can't work with a team, because it irked me more than I thought. What do you mean he can't work in a team? The last episode, he was working fine with Officer Jenny. A couple episodes before that, he was working fine with the electrical handy woman. After the first couple of episodes, Go has never had an issue working together with people there. What type of excuse is that? That is super lazy writing. And that's really weird because the episode here is written by Shoji Yonemura, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, who has written some of the better episodes in the series. So I don't understand why they use such a lazy way of making Go say no. Couldn't he have just said something to the effect of, oh, I don't think I'm ready yet, or oh, I want to do something my own way, rather than having him just say, I can't work with the team? That seems like such a bizarre way to get Go to say no. Come on. Anyways, back to the original recording. I think the reason people are so mixed on this episode is how this episode is structured. There really seems to be a lack of structure in this episode, because in this episode, we go from learning about Project Mew, to Ash's Pokemon returning, to looking for Ash's Infernape, to helping Gary look for Moltres, to a battle that turns out not to really be about Infernape at all, but rather back to Project Mew. This bouncing around from plot point to plot point really makes the pacing of this episode weird. I'm not saying the pacing is bad or anything, but it's just strange, and you really notice the hard lines between the different plots. However, the one through line here seems to be Project Mew, and this episode is really not about Gary, it's not really about Infernape, it's not even about Moltres. It's about establishing what Project Mew is and Go getting interested enough to participate in it. But that through line's not established very well, so you don't really find out what the episode is really about until the end. At first, you think maybe it's a return episode, but then it turns out to be Ash's Infernape is missing, so maybe it's a rescue episode. But no, they find his Infernape pretty quickly, so maybe it's a battle episode, battle with Moltres. But no, it's not really even a battle episode, it's more about the aftermath of the battle, where Gary gets the flame of Moltres. See what I mean? It jumps from plot point to plot point, and it doesn't really do it in a very smooth transition, so this episode feels very jarring in that way. However, does that mean it's bad? No, I don't think so at all, actually. Project Mew is established well enough so you have a decent idea of what it is, but it's still mysterious enough that you want to learn more. The return is also done well enough where we get some continuity and some story in the form of flashbacks, but it's not too much where you don't know what's going on. They give you enough information so that if you've not watched the previous series, or you're someone new in the series, you can follow along pretty easily. That's a good thing. You don't just want to placate to your hardcore audiences by having deep cuts. You just want to give them enough information so that they can follow along easily, and this episode does that really well. Also, another controversy of this episode is that Infernape is seemingly nerfed, but like I said, this episode's not really about Infernape. Sure, Infernape is a plot device to move the story along, but the story is really about Gary and Project Mew, and so Infernape not being the focus of the story doesn't really bother me all that much. It's the same reason why Torkoal not being in the reunion doesn't bother me either. It's not about him. I think the issue is, like I said, the episode sets you up in so many different ways that for a long time you think maybe this episode is about Infernape. That's the biggest issue with the episode. If it had handled the structure of the plot a little bit better, it wouldn't feel like that. If Gary had laid out his plans that he needed to get the Moltres feather in order to take part in Project Mew, and that was the catalyst to the story, that would feel a lot more organic, and you wouldn't think that this episode is about Infernape, because now you know that it's more about Gary trying to get a feather from Moltres. But as it is, it's pretty clunky, but it's not bad by any means either. Also, I'm pretty sure this is the first episode where the show acknowledges Ash releasing his Pidgeot and never going back for it, because when Go spots a Pidgeot, Ash is all depressed. I thought that was fantastic. So overall, I actually like this episode quite a bit. It sets up a future story, it sets up a future rivalry potentially, because we know that Gary's most likely returning for Project Mew, and it sets up Go as a character that's going to be focused on moving forward. I have no problem with that, and if that doesn't bother you, then I think you really enjoyed this episode. The next episode also seems like filler, and I'm talking about the 100% of filler of last episode type filler. Hopefully that's not the case, but I guess we'll just have to wait and find out, huh? But anyways, that is it for my review of episode 68 of the Journeys anime. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, share, subscribe in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can follow me on Twitter at TheRealPDGaming, and that's it. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.